Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this STARS College Network Rural and Small Town Student Panel tonight. So as we get started, I do want to just give a quick introduction about who we are. The STARS College Network is a consortium of 16 colleges and universities from across the United States that are committed to improving both access and affordability to higher education for rural and small town students. All 16 schools are united in our mission to make college a reality for all students. We're going to be encouraging them to consider college. We're going to be helping them through the admissions and application process. We're going to be supporting them throughout their entire college career. The STARS colleges are going to be providing a variety of free college planning tools and activities that are going to help students to learn about and prepare for and apply to and succeed once they get to college. If you want to learn a little bit more about the STARS Network and the colleges and universities that are involved, please go to the STARS Network website, which is starscollegenetwork.org, and we'll put that into the chat here during the session as well. I'll paraphrase the four elements. Number one, we have committed to expanding our visits so that we're visiting more rural high schools and communities. Number two, all of our schools will be hosting special programs for rural students to visit our campuses. Number three, we're working to establish some partnerships with businesses to provide internships for our rural students. And four, we are and will be hosting virtual sessions, very much like this one, that are geared towards rural and small town students, but that are available to anyone who wants to take advantage of them. So those are just a few of the things that you can expect from the STARS College Network. Now, that's me on the right-hand side of the page. My name is Dan Pohl, and I'm an Assistant Director of Outreach and Recruitment at The Ohio State University. And I know that you didn't sign in to listen to me. You want to hear from our students. So at this point, I'm going to turn the session over to my co-host, Clayton Land. And I'll ask you, Clayton, please to introduce yourself. And then if you would kind of manage the student panel and facilitate that, please. It's all yours.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Hi, everyone. My name is Clayton Land. I am from a small town in Kentucky on the screen you see right there. It's called Lawrenceburg. I am a graduate of Yale this past May in 2022. I graduated with a double major in global affairs and history, and then also a minor in Spanish. So kind of because I am from a small town, I realized in college that I wanted to pursue a path that helped the rural areas after being at such a contrast where I was meeting students from larger cities. And me being from a small town, I realized what the disparities were, and I wanted to give back to the community that helped raise me. And so kind of because of that, on campus, I was a part of the creation of the Rural Students Alliance at Yale. So it was the first of its kind at Yale, of giving a space to students from small towns, just kind of a space to be with others, find community, laugh about funny things like, how many McDonald's does your town have? I have 2. How many stoplights? I have 5. Just like fun things like that, and finding community, and just kind of what it's like to be a small town student at college. So also at Yale, I was also part of student government, the Yale College Council, and I was also a first-year counselor in my residential college, which is basically like an RA. So I was mentoring other students from similar backgrounds, but also different backgrounds. So it was really nice to meet people and how their experiences got them to Yale and how they were living their lives throughout their first year. And so, yeah, that's just a little bit about me. So I'm post-grad now, trying to find the intersections of rurality in every day of my life. But so that's a quick intro about me, but I want to switch over to our lovely panelists who will be answering the questions today. So I'm going to go ahead and invite Mallory and Andrew first. Come off camera, come off mute, introduce yourselves and kind of your background.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Gottschall. I am a rising senior, which meaning I'll be a senior in the fall, from Carrollton, Ohio. It's a small town in Northeast Ohio, about 30 minutes south of Canton, Ohio, where you may know where the Pro Football Hall of Fame is. I am currently majoring in biomedical science on a pre-MD PhD track, And at Ohio State, I am doing type 1 diabetes research as well as some recruitment things for the football team and other awesome opportunities. I always like to give people the analogy that when I came to Ohio State, before I came to Ohio State, rather, I was a large fish in a small pond, and now I'm a large fish in the ocean. And so, recognizing some of the disadvantages and advantages that come from, coming from rural America, I've definitely tried to utilize those and guide people to the same path that I've now found at Ohio State. And many of the panelists will be able to speak to the awesome experience that comes from going to a larger city. So happy to have you guys here, happy to share more of my story, and looking forward to getting you to college just as I am today.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Mallory Goodwin, and I'm from Waynesville, Missouri, which is a really close-knit military community about 2.5 hours away from where I go to school at Washington, St. Louis. I'm currently a first-year undergrad majoring in psychology and minoring in legal studies, and I'm planning to go on to law school after undergrad to continue that education and pursue a career in law. In my free time, I really like to volunteer around campus and in the St. Louis community, as well as compete with the WashU debate team. And living outside of my hometown for the first time and having all these new experiences has really made me aware of my rurality and opened my eyes into the way that's influenced my life and how that's made my life different from students who maybe aren't from rural communities. For that reason, I'm really proud to be a part of WashU's inaugural Rural Scholars Academy, and I'm really thrilled to be here with you today talking about colleges and talking about colleges from the perspective of a rural student.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Jay Coffin. I am a rising senior from Yale University studying political and computer science. I am also the head of development at one of our student clubs, the Urban Philanthropic Fund, and am doing research with Google's Jigsaw team on pre-bunking, misinformation, and I'm generally just like a fellow for general tech policy research. And I'm from a small town in East Tennessee, about 50 minutes either way from Knoxville and Chattanooga. And I can effectively say that I got to Yale through the communal assistance of my town, my teachers, my friends, and all of my familial support. And I just want to pay it forward. And anything I can do to help anyone else, I'll do it. And coming from a rural town in Timbuktu, Tennessee, you do feel quite like a fish in the ocean. So that's a very apt metaphor I will be taking carry on. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Olivia. I am a fourth year here at the University of Iowa, majoring in speech and hearing sciences with a minor in music. And I'm originally from Monticello, Iowa, which is a small town up in like northeastern Iowa, eastern Iowa. So here on campus, I'm involved in a few things. I am the clarinet section leader for the Hawkeye Marching Band, which has been super fun. And something that's crazy about the marching band is that the marching band is the same size as my high school. And so getting involved with something that was the same size as my high school when I got here was kind of crazy, considering that the school itself is 8 times as large as my town. So I also do research in the pediatric audiology lab. I'm working on my honors thesis, which deals with spelling right now. And then I also work in the Office of Admissions. So it's been really interesting being able to convey what I've learned as like a rural student coming from a rural background with other students as they come and visit and check out campus and hopefully decide to come to the University of Iowa. So I'm super happy to be here with you all tonight, and I'm excited to answer questions.
Cool, great. Thanks you all so much for sharing about your backgrounds and kind of being willing to talk about what it's like to be a rural student on campus. I'm glad we have kind of a diverse group too, from people from different universities as well. So that's really nice. So to kick us off, I think one thing that kind of is on our minds is being from a small town and then going to college is the college search and application process. So I'd love to hear from everyone kind of what was your experience with finding a college and applying to college. So feel free to jump in and kind of bounce off of each other too.
Yeah, I can start us off. So, coming in to college, obviously, growing up in a small town, I never felt the need to apply to out-of-state schools. I never could imagine me wanting to leave little old Ohio. It just seemed like a lot of a transition, and I'm glad I stayed in Ohio. But regardless, I mostly applied to 6 schools in Ohio. I list them off the top of my head, but I don't really remember them all. So the search process kind of started for me because my high school would do like a day where we would all get split up and go to different colleges and just kind of do like a mini visit. And so that was like really my first time stepping foot on a campus. And then I was like, whoa, this is getting real. Like college is coming up fast. And so ironically, the program I'm in, I'll save you a lot of the details, but at Ohio State's a little unique. And so originally I knew if I wanted to go to a big name school to do big name research, which is kind of my passion, I was going to need to like pursue something in biomedical science, biochem, something like that. So I had actually looked on the directory at Ohio State's website, found biochem, and right under it was this biomedical science thing. It's a research tailored program. It was everything I wanted. I kind of found it out of chance. And now, 3 years later, I'm 1 year away from graduating with my bachelor's in arts. So my college search was a little untraditional. I also was a COVID baby. I graduated in 2020. So graduating as a virtual senior and then entering an entire virtual freshman year was something else, and we can talk about that later. But the college search for me, in summary, was basically I knew I wanted to stay close. I'm very family oriented, very community oriented, but I also knew that like a small college wasn't for my professional aspirations, and so that's what led me to Ohio State.
I'm kind of similar as Andrew. Well, first of all, I grew up a diehard Hawkeye fan, so that kind of made the decision a little easy. And when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, the University of Iowa has a really great speech and hearing science program. So that kind of everything fell into place for me. But the University of Iowa was the only school I applied to. And then I talked to, a lot of friends once I got here, and they were all like, oh, I applied to 6 schools. I applied to 8. I did 4. I went all across the country and visited colleges, which is just not something that I knew people did. So that was a little bit of my application process, but I also knew that I wanted to stay close to home, very family oriented, but also knew that I wanted to try something a little bit different. And I knew that a Big Ten university could definitely give that to me.
Yeah, I can go next. So I actually knew that going in, computer science wasn't something that was often taught around my town. So I knew that I would have to go away. So to begin with, I started looking with schools that prioritized full aid and that prioritized diversity and inclusion in their mission statement. Because those were the areas that I felt were most lacking from my current education. So going in, I knew that I wanted to be in a place that had a good comp sci program and that prioritized its community and the diversity and cohesion of its community. And eventually I ended up using a program for low-income students called QuestBridge, which if you guys haven't heard of it, strongly recommend looking into it. QuestBridge is it's another program that provides pre-college aid, college aid in the application process. It's actually how I got into Yale. Happy to talk more about that later. But QuestBridge provided me a community to get support and to share my resources, any resources that I got in the college application process. I was able both to receive new ones and share the ones that I had with other people and fully make the best of that experience.
Yeah, I can round us out for this question. I would also consider my college application process to be slightly untraditional, just in the sense that I think around the time that I was a junior or senior in high school, I really was not sure about much of anything with what I wanted to do with school. And I remember feeling just an overwhelming amount of anxiety, which I'm sure is normal for everyone here. One thing that I did know was that I really wanted to stay close to home. I think that's something that's been a common thread through a couple of panelists here, and I really related to that. Family is super important to me, and I knew that I wanted to be near my family. My sister's in St. Louis right now, and like I said, my family lives about 2 hours away. So WashU seemed like a really good decision based on its location and also based on the fact that there were so many different academic possibilities that you could pursue at WashU. And for someone who was a little uncertain about what they wanted to do going into college, that was really appealing to me.
Yeah, great. Thank you all so much for sharing. Yeah, I think one of the most important things to take away from these 4 different responses is that rural students are not a monolith. I think everyone comes from different backgrounds and has different needs when they're looking for universities and applying and different family structures, educational needs, things like that. So I think that's something really important to highlight is as you're going through the process, just kind of finding out what you feel like would best help you stay connected or do whatever you feel is best. So moving on, I think kind of in this college application process too. I know that for me, there was sometimes pressure or perceptions from my community about it. So I'd like to ask, how did your family, school, town, everything view the application process of college? Kind of what were some of the things you were hearing as you were applying?
So in my hometown, trade school is actually a lot more popular in college. Trade school is definitely something that most people have picked up. All my close friends actually are off in a career making good money, and I'm, pulling out student loans and, still filing for financial aid, which is perfectly fine. But that's just the, my community's kind of trend. And so my family actually, my mom pursued a college degree. My father barely graduated high school. And he owns it, so I'm okay with telling you all that. And so like in my family, there actually was a good bit of opposite pressure to go to college because my father had seen like, a very successful businessman, but he had seen like, as the job market kind of evolved that a degree was getting more and more essential. And my mom obviously pursued higher education. And so she wanted to see that for like me, and my older sister had already completed her college career. So I kind of got two sides of the sword. Like my community was very much, not very popular. I'm the only one from my hometown. I'm only 2.5 hours away from campus, but the only one from the 2020 class in my high school that went to Ohio State. And I know that maybe only a handful of us actually ended up going to college. I know one other of my best friends is like pre-med, but other than that, like everyone just pursued trade school. So overall, that was kind of the trend in my community. It was trade school, and kind of your family's background in like education kind of really influenced where you were headed. But I didn't really resist it because I was kind of already dead set in where I was going. So a pretty smooth, not very challenging, but more just kind of like maneuvering through that stigma a little bit.
Personally for me, a lot of my town is farmers. So there was never any like good or bad things about going to college, going to university. But a lot of people did decide to either like go into the family business. Again, a lot of farming. Also, we have a Kirkwood Community College right in our town. So a lot of people would go to Kirkwood and stay at home and work and then get like an associate's degree or something like that. And so that's kind of the general trend. I think we had ended up with like 5 people from my town coming to the University of Iowa. Lots of kids going to state schools, but again, a lot of people going to Kirkwood, getting that kind of associate's degree path. So it was never discouraged or encouraged. It was just kind of like one of those things, you kind of just chose it. So that's kind of how I ended up here. I always knew I wanted to go to a 4-year school, get that 4-year college experience, stuff like that. But it kind of just varies from class to class, person to person, as well as family background.
So a second question that I want to ask about is kind of relating to first generation college students. So are any of you first generation college students, and did it affect you when you started applying to college? Just kind of from my own perspective, I am a first generation student. And I think a lot of the process was very ambiguous. There was FAFSA, which I had never heard of. My parents didn't know really how to help me. My parents didn't know what Common App was. There were just so many different barriers where I think my parents kind of were completely removed from the college application process. I remember telling them my ACT score when I got it, and they were like, "Is that good? I don't know what that means." And so I think there was just kind of not as much guidance in the process, and that made it difficult. But I think having community elsewhere, and like my teachers and my friends and stuff, was really helpful for that. So I'd love to ask kind of the same if any of you are first gen, and sharing your experience.
Yeah, I can start. So like you, Clayton, I am also first gen, and because we didn't have that kind of institutional support from our families, despite their best efforts, you really learn how to develop and lean on other communities as a crutch. So your teachers, your fellow peers going through the same process, and then like whatever random communities you can find elsewhere, all become invaluable resources through this process. And you truly, you learn as much as you can from everyone you can. And I think that the wealth of resources that are available to you as a first gen applicant is truly not to be understated. Lots and lots of things out there, just if you are able to reach it out.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jay, for sharing. Yeah, I think also Jay mentioned earlier too that he did Questbridge, which I also was a part of. So I think Jay and I have very similar backgrounds. But yeah, so that was a great resource for me in the college application process too. So you want to Google that. That was kind of my entry to like the window beyond my town too. So that's a great resource. So moving on, kind of from the college application process and transitioning to your college campus, how easy did you find it to make friends at your school? Did you feel welcomed when you came, or did you feel sometimes on the outside? I feel like for me, when I was coming to campus, I think I brought that small town feel to Yale, and I was just so eager to meet everyone, kind of get to know their story, their background. And so I think that was just a very valuable perspective to have on campus, just bringing that small town feel and hospitality, but would love to hear what y'all say too.
I can start us off. I know I feel like I remember this pretty vividly. I'm a first year, so I think I'm still kind of in the middle of it. I felt really welcomed when I came here, which I think was so wonderful to find out, because I mean, I think everyone feels a lot of anxiety when they're going into college, and I was definitely included in that. But I've already made some of my best friends, and I'm so excited to spend the next 3 years with them. And I think, kind of going off of what you're talking about, Clayton, the small town perspective of communicating with people and getting to know people, I think, is something that is really important. And I think that WashU has a lot of students from really diverse backgrounds. And I think that seeing all of that work together was really great and made my experience better.
Yeah, I think for me, just getting involved in different things, coming from a small town and a small school, everyone basically did everything. Like I was in softball, I did drama, I did band and choir and golf and student council, and like the list goes on, because there's just not enough people to do everything. So small town students kind of do everything. And so when I got to Iowa, I kind of jumped in with the same headset of just doing everything, which was a learning curve. I was like, okay, this is a bit of a different situation. So kind of figuring out how to balance all that was an interesting kind of go around at first, but it also allowed me to get involved right away because I knew how important it was, and find a community right away on campus. So now there's not like a single time I'm on campus that I don't see someone I know from my campus job, from band, from another student org, from class. So that just makes campus feel that much smaller.
Yeah, great. Thank you all so much for responding. Olivia, that's a perfect segue into another question that I have, kind of about like support services on campus. So which of these like support services or resources do you feel like you relied on when you were coming into college that like made it easier to transition as a rural student?
Yeah, I can definitely attest to this. Yale provides you a significant number of resources as a first year incoming student, but I find much more valuable the support from your fellow peers. Lots of when you get on campus and you find people who come from similar backgrounds, the support networks that get established then are going to carry you and support you in ways that no institutional support could. So while those institutional support networks, of course, are valuable, the first year FROCO program that Clayton was a part of, as well as several like academic strategies and mentoring programs, so on and so forth. All of those are incredible resources, but I feel, at least from my experience, that finding friends who came from similar backgrounds, or had similar sentiments or experiences, and kind of creating a network for us to work with and share resources and information, facilitated my transition much better than anything else did.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jay. Yeah, I think definitely finding that community is so important on campus. I remember the first rural friend that I made. She was from Gallipolis, Ohio, if there are any Southeastern Ohioans. And that was just like kind of the entry point where I was able to meet other small town friends and build that community. So yeah, it's really nice to build that. And that's kind of what led to the creation of our student group too. So encourage you to look into that process at your universities as well. So on a similar note too, I think in the transition process too, there are maybe some like academic learning curves and barriers that might happen. So where do you feel like maybe you found a place on campus socially or academically, but like you felt like you belonged in and just being able to adapt more to your college campus?
Yeah, this is one that I hit me pretty hard. So I'll be honest, coming from my small high school, I was not ready for college at all. I think like the mantra of pursuing higher education, especially in like, maybe deeply professional degrees, you come in with like, a lot of smarts and then maybe a little bit of an ego, and you think like, you never studied 3 or 4 years. You were, I was an athlete all through high school, so like didn't really have time anyways. And you think college works that way, and it doesn't. And so I think I found a lot of support in a lot of the ways that were just mentioned, just getting involved in different resources and different organizations with similar people from similar backgrounds and even different backgrounds that could just like sprinkle, perspectives and, things to help you out in your first year through that transition. And I think a lot of my like struggles weren't socially, it was really academically. And I was again online, which makes it really hard to answer some of these questions, but it definitely is a big learning curve. So I would really, really, really encourage you to be proactive in what you do. I saw a question in the chat that kind of relates to this about how do you set yourself apart. And I think like a way you can prepare yourself and set yourself apart is just like trying to make the most out of the resources that are in your small town right now. For example, something that helped me out a lot that kind of made, the blow a little less when I hit my freshman year is I did some research experiences in my senior year, as well as some like, hospital shadowing and things like that. And just kind of exposing yourself out of your comfort zone while still in high school and while still in your small town, even if it means driving like an hour and a half to Cleveland to shadow at the Cleveland Clinic. Like, you just have to kind of make those sacrifices and you'll thank yourself in the long run for it. So definitely expect the transition to be hard, but it's definitely manageable. And I think I'll like be a better professional someday because of it.
This is a question that I think resonated a lot with me too. I think it's been a common theme that I've talked about how stressed I was like going into college. And I think one thing that really made that so much better was just developing a community. And I think that that's something that you do in your first year, especially. It's just so important. Because I mean, the reality is that like college is hard and it's going to be hard. But it's definitely manageable, like Andrew was just saying. And I think having a community of people that can support you and that can hold you accountable. Sometimes my friends and I will just be around each other to do homework to make sure that no one's on their phone. I think is so important. And also as people that you can share your experiences with, I think it really normalizes whatever it is that you're experiencing. When you say something and someone goes, oh my goodness, me too. I think that's like maintaining that perspective is really important and can be really helpful and something I would definitely recommend.
Yeah, great. Thank you all so much for sharing. No, I think what Andrew said about kind of the ego was something that I experienced very well coming into college. I think I took like AP Calculus AB coming into college, and I was like, oh, like that was Calculus 1. Like I'm ready for Calculus 2. And then I realized what the big disparity was between a rural high school Calculus 1 and then a college Calculus 2. So I think that is one thing where there is definitely a learning curve, but I think there are so many support groups on campus, whether other students or campus resources that can help with that. So that also segues into another question about your first year in college. So what aspects do you feel like were easier than expected coming into your first year? And then what were some that you felt like were harder than expected?
I can start with this one. I think something that was, I'm going to start with the harder one so my school was a big T and I knew every single teacher. I had every teacher like twice ever. I knew who to go to for XYZ, all these different things. And so when I got to the University of Iowa, there's 1,000 faculty members here, and I didn't know exactly who to go to for what. I remember like emailing my academic advisor because she was the only person I knew on campus, being like, hey, who do I contact about this? And she was great helping me make sure I got to exactly where I needed to go. But I think that was something that made it was a little bit more challenging because there was such a broader amount of people that could help me that I could go to. So that was a bit of an adjustment, but again, kind of like I mentioned earlier, something that was a little easier was getting involved. It also helps that I was in the band, and on the week before school started, we actually had our band camp week. So I got to meet everyone and get to know everyone right before the school year started. And again, I think that goes to small town kids, just get involved in a lot of different things. So I think that was a little bit easier for me transitioning than I thought it was going to be.
And I can jump in on this one too. I think the hardest thing for me was also the faculty aspect. I know for any of you pre-meds out there or, aspiring pre-meds, like recommendation letters are going to become a very big reality for you one of these days. And starting early is really great. But also just building those relationships can also benefit you in just ways that you've never would have imagined. And so I think that was one of my struggles my freshman year was just like who to reach out to, who to go to, who to connect to, who's like, maybe worth in your best interest and maybe who's not. Those are just life things that you just got to kind of sort out. I think one of the easier aspects was just finding my peers that are like have the same interests as me, but then also being able to, and something I wasn't, coming from a small town, everyone kind of seems like everyone, right? Like everyone is almost cut in the same like cookie cutter. Um, Finding other people that are, a different cookie cutter. I think like I gained a lot of perspective in my first, year in college, and it really was again a slap in the face. But it kind of made things easier in the long run. And so I think being open-minded, but then also being very intentional about who you're connecting with can really help you. And the benefits, are still benefiting me today. So keep an open mind, and you'll get through it. I promise.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Olivia and Andrew. So another question that I want to quickly ask before maybe we'll open it up to some live questions from the audience is, what misconceptions about colleges would you like to debunk for today's like rural high school students? So something that like maybe you thought was going to be a bigger issue than it actually was, or just anything relating to that. So misconceptions of that. Yeah.
Not all of your classes are going to be large. At least at the University of Iowa, only 4% of our classes actually have 100 people or more. 80% of our classes have 30 students or less. And so I had classes ranging from 350 people all the way down to 15 people in my first year alone. So knowing that you're going to walk in and you're going to have varying size classes is good. And honestly, I love my lectures because it's a chance to meet a lot of different people. So that was something that I was really concerned about, because my largest class in high school was maybe 18 people. So not all your classes are going to be huge.
One thing that I think has been really close to my heart as I've come into college and really understand exactly like how my rurality has impacted the person that I've become, is sort of dispelling the idea that your rurality is in some way like a downside to who you are or to your college experience, or will harm your college experience in some way. I think that it's true that in a lot of ways, for reasons that have nothing to do with who we are as people, there is oftentimes a lack of access to resources in rural communities. Sometimes it's just the geography of it all. But at the same time, coming from a close-knit community where people really get to know you and you try to get to know them, I think builds your confidence, builds your interpersonal skills in ways that you can't even begin to imagine until you understand how hard you have to work them in college. And I also think that I like the process of going through college, especially when it's something that maybe you do feel some anxiety about. Getting through that, I think, will also build your confidence in probably a unique way. So I think viewing your rurality and your background as something that's a positive overall is something that I think everyone should prioritize.
Yeah, thank you so much, both of you. Yeah, no, I definitely resonate with what Mallory was saying about viewing your rurality as a positive. I came into college kind of seeing it as a negative, but then realized how unique and the perspectives that it gave me on campus. So that's definitely a big one. So we have 2 minutes-ish until maybe we'll open up for the questions from the audience. But I do want to ask this last one. I think we've talked a lot about being on a college campus and like academic and social life, but we're missing that aspect of actually living in a city for the first time. So what is it like living in a bigger city? So I came from a town of maybe like 10,000 people and then moved to a smaller city of about 150, 160,000. So what is that process like? And also, how do you stay connected to your rural roots?
My first impression was that it was loud. So like at home, like you hear the trains, you hear the crickets, you hear the birds, you hear the bugs in the bushes, but that's about the only sound at night. In the city, like there's always like noise. It's just constant. Noise pollution is never more apt than when you're trying to sleep and motorcycles are racing down the street at like 2 a.m. And you're like, why? Just because they can. And it's stuff like that. People are doing shenanigans. There are shenanigans and noise all the time. The sheer amount of things that there are was also astounding to me. Like we don't have a lot in my town. So having the diversity of options like movie theaters and escape rooms and restaurants galore, like all of these different options simply for outings was also new. Something I also found my last piece, something I also found interesting, at least being here in New England, was that like buildings have more than one story. Like at home, like everything is flat. Like it's all just like one story flat buildings, but that's not the case up here. And in actuality, and I think in many cities, it's all very much more compact. Everything's much more close together, which has its pros and its cons. But it was something that took a lot of getting adjusted.
Jay, I'm glad you went first because you hit a lot of that on the money. I would say to answer the second part of that question is how I stay connected to like my hometown is like all those great things that Jay was talking about, the endless things to do, you know, the people to see, everything. Like the whole entire experience just living in a big city is so different that it's like so intriguing and so easy to invite your friends to campus. I live really close to home in a sense, so maybe this isn't a reality for everyone, but like I stay connected to my roots because like I have my friends down a good bit and there's always something new to do. We grew up, you know, having to drive 45 minutes north just to get like a Starbucks or a Chipotle, you know, and so like having a Chipotle right down the road, even though maybe I've abused it a lot in the last few years, has been awesome. And so it's just like it's just such a culture shock, especially only being like 2.5 hours away from home. And like just to echo everything Jay said, it's just so fun to share that experience with people that grew up similar to you, because they get it. And you know, maybe you'll meet like groups on campus that have come from the same, demographics as you, but they just don't get it like your hometown folks do.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Andrew and Jay, for answering that. So now I want to move on to some of the questions that we have in Q&A, and just ask those to you all, and you all can provide some answers. So the first one that we have is from Winston Smith. How can students without access to higher level classes, such as AP classes, sort of close the difference between them and other applicants?
Yeah, so I didn't have AP classes at my school. We had actually one, and I took the AP test, and then when I got to Ohio State, the credits didn't count. But it was a science course, so at Ohio State, how they traditionally like to see and how most med schools like to see is they like to see you actually take those core science courses at the collegiate level, which is a story for another day. But how I came in with a lot of credits, I've only taken like 2 or 3 general education, classes here at Ohio State because I did a lot of college credit plus. And so there are now with especially Zoom and online, like, module systems and things, like you can get classes cranked out online from virtually any university across the nation. And so even if you don't have a community college close, like I was, blessed to have, you should really look into, trying to take some CCP courses, and make sure that those courses you're taking are universally transferable to maybe some projected universities that you want to end up in. I think those things will make you very, competitive and help you close that gap. And then also what I tried to allude to earlier, and I like, this is like my soapbox statement, so I'll keep saying it, is like, to set yourself apart, you need to show how you took the resources that you have in your rural community and made it into something that most have not thought of, right? So like, again, I was able to muster up a research out of a high school that graduated 150 students in the year I graduated. Like, it's just things that are really unheard of that people are just going to kind of scratch their head and be like, wow, this kid has some gumption, has some initiative, and he's serious about what he wants to do. So definitely look into CCP, and like how those things transfer. And then also just, every opportunity you have to set yourself apart, definitely pursue it.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. So the next question that I'm seeing, what are some options for signing up to summer programs / research at a university, especially in small towns, which would be too expensive to go to programs / schools out of the area? And I see that Jay said he wanted to answer this one, so I'll pass it off to him first.
Yes, thank you, Clayton. And I think Andrew touched on this in a little bit earlier, but I think you should reach out to your local organizations, local people and just see what you can get involved with. And truly, like it sounds so simple, but that's truly the key is you just reach out to people and you ask. And the worst they can say is no. Often most people find their experiences by just reaching out to random people who are engaged in projects that they find interesting. So if your local politician is doing work, or if there's a community initiative that you find particularly compelling, and there's an area that you think could be like aided by your help, then approach the director and be like, yo, I want to help you out. Can I help you out? Often these people love volunteers. People love to have help with their projects, especially when it's community oriented. So reach out to anyone and everyone you can get in touch with and just see what opportunities are available to you. And that's the biggest tip that I think you can have outside of collegiate opportunities like that. Also, with that in the same breath, you can reach out to local organizations for grants and support, financial support, if the opportunities aren't paid. Sometimes there's a lot of local support that you can get from local grants, but whether it be state or school, that can help you monetarily offset the kind of opportunity cost that you would get from working at that other opportunity.
Great. Yeah. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Layla.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. Yeah, I also would like to touch on that too. From my own experience, one of the ways that I did it too was I joined the Junior Conservation Board, a part of my county's government. So the conservation board in my county, they were just allowing high schoolers to work with them. And so that was just one way that I found, just like through people that I knew in my town, that I would be able to do some conservation efforts too. So that was kind of viewed as like an internship kind of thing while I was in school. So that's definitely a great way to do it, is just getting involved in community stuff. So another question that we have comes from Lucy. To what extent would the schools in small towns / rural areas affect the in-person internship opportunities compared to schools in big cities?
Clayton, if you don't mind, I might try to answer this, since this seems to be more of a staff-related question rather than a student panel question.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, this is going to vary from one institution to another. But I would say that when colleges and academic units are working with their students to set up internships, whether you're from a small town, rural community is not really going to affect that. You know, for internships and co-ops, what they're more looking for are students who are prepared to have the right coursework so that they're going to be successful in that internship. Yes, we want you to go out and learn from the company that you're doing that internship with, but we want to make sure that you have the basic knowledge first before we send you out there. You know, we don't want you to send you out to do an internship with an accounting firm, for example, or an architecture firm if you don't have the kind of a foundation that's going to help you to be successful. That's going to make it difficult for the firm that you're working for, and it's going to be more difficult for you. So most colleges will offer those internships and co-ops sophomore year, junior year, senior year, rather than for freshmen, because they want you to use those that first year or two to get the right coursework under your belt so that you're prepared to do those internships. But where you're from is not going to be a factor in that. It really is going to be more to do with what your interests are and what coursework you have under your belt to be prepared. I hope that helps.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. So our next question comes from Kelsey. So they say, to my understanding, big schools for the most part are usually more difficult in terms of academics and rigorous workloads. What does this transformation look like? And do you have any tips on managing this workload?
I would love to take this question. So one thing that I definitely was really concerned about going into my first year was just how I was going to manage the workload. I think Olivia mentioned how she did everything in high school, and that was definitely my reality too. And I knew that I was just not going to be able to live that same life going into college, and I wasn't sure what it was going to look like for me. One thing that I would really stress is to rely on your resources. At almost any school, I would almost guarantee you that your school has resources dedicated to learning and to study skills. If you take them, I'm really fortunate to say that WashU has a wonderful learning center where you can go in and book appointments just to talk about your study skills. And for me, that was really helpful. Also, relying on, I kind of talked about it earlier, a community is really important, because if it is an attention thing, sometimes having someone to be in the room with you can make it better. Study groups are one of the best tools that I've found so far just to understand information. I think talking to your professors as well about what they would recommend to study for courses is kind of an undervalued tip. But the reality is that your professors are the ones that are writing the tests, and they know what they want to see on exams or on papers. And so sometimes having sort of that like firsthand advice from the person who's the expert in the area can be really helpful in terms of like how you would gear it. I also think that there are lots of wonderful online resources that can kind of help you like navigate how you should approach learning. Of course, there are always like learning myths that you should be aware of. So I'd be aware of where you're getting your resources from. But I would really recommend just appealing to the science and understanding like how learning actually takes place and gearing your study habits towards that. And I think that if you're studying in a way that's effective, it's going to be time efficient as well, and it'll yield results.
Great, awesome. Thank you, Mallory. So I think that is probably all the time that we have for some live questions. But if you do have remaining questions that we didn't get to answer, or just think of some later on, you can submit all of these questions through the STARS Network website, which I believe Corinne sent in the chat earlier. So kind of to round off the end of our panel today, I want to ask two questions just to talk about kind of just summarizing what it's like to be a rural student on a college campus. So the first, I'd like all the panelists to answer, how would you describe your school in 3 words?
I can start. I think that I would describe Iowa as just community, opportunities, and resources.
I can go. I would say I would describe WashU as balanced, welcoming. Oh my goodness, I just lost it. As really balanced, really welcoming, and a really emphasis on community.
I would say Ohio State's also stressing the resources, the traditions. Everyone knows Ohio State football, go Bucks. And also the community. I think it wasn't as large as it seemed when I was a freshman compared to now.
I would say community enriched recreation. I think the least important part about Yale is its academics. It's about the community. It's about the community that you gain and that you create and that you leave on for the next. But it's also about having fun and preparing for the next stage of your life. So community and fun.
Great. Yeah. Thank you all so much for sharing that. And so our last question that we kind of want to round off the night with is, what advice do you have for other rural and small town students going through the college search and application process? Just kind of, what is that like of just applying and also transitioning? And you can touch on anything that you feel like maybe we didn't talk about enough, whether that's living in a city, if there are any like safety adjustments, if there's anything about like academic rigor you'd like to touch on, go ahead and give that advice right now. So yeah.
I can start. I think my biggest piece of advice is to kind of embrace the awkward and unknown, because you just don't know what opportunities are going to lie on the other side of that. I know going to a larger school in a larger city can be really intimidating at first, but I promise it will be worth it. I know personally that I've gained a lot of experiences by coming to a Big Ten university, and that you just kind of got to embrace it. Don't lose your small town charm, because a lot of my friends think it's really funny when I talk about the fact that I only have like 2 stoplights in my town, or they love coming to see Monticello because it's like itsy bitsy compared to theirs. One of my best friends is like, oh, I went to like this Starbucks. I'm like, she has 4 to choose from. I don't have that. So don't lose that. And I think just like put yourself out there, because there's going to be people who love you, and you're going to find that community, and you're going to find your friends, and it'll all be worth it.
I think one of the things that really sent me to Ohio State, and I would give this advice to anyone looking at colleges, is like actually go if you're able. I think I was very blessed to be able to like, take a trip to Ohio State. Obviously, it's very close to home, compared to maybe some other students wanting to go out of state. But almost immediately I knew like this was home for me and that I could make it work. I think that I was really, really skeptical about the transition, and the transition is hard. I won't sugarcoat it, but I would encourage you to be very patient. I think that, it's very easy for all of us to join in on this Zoom and say about all the awesome experiences we've had now that we're in it, but it not everyone's path is linear. And so I would be very, very, encouraged by tonight's talk, but also, just very mindful that everyone's path might, just be a little different. And so sometimes you just got to be a little more patient than others. And I can assure you that especially at these big universities, you will find your niche, and you'll find your group, and you'll find your people, and you'll find your resources, and you'll all look back on everything you've had and have a good laugh someday. So I definitely say step out of your comfort zone. It's not always going to be 100% a great time, but at least 90 of it will.
Yeah, I mirror that, but also add, be kind to yourself. College is hard, life is even harder. And success will really come from leveraging your current assets and your current strengths rather than gaining any new ones. If you weren't ready, you wouldn't have the opportunity, and if you weren't capable, you wouldn't have the desire. So be kind to yourself and pursue anything you want to, and have fun.
I really resonate with what Jay just said. I think that having grace with yourself is so important because this is a really difficult process that you're going through, but you'll come out on the other end totally fine. I think that's the first thing that, like, the first piece of advice that I would give is that it is a really anxiety inducing process and it can be really scary because it does have a really big impact on the rest of your life. But regardless of whether or not you get into like the dream school that you might have, or you go to the school that you think you would go to, it's going to end up okay. At worst case scenario, you end up transferring and then you'll end up okay either way. So that's my first piece of advice. And I think my second piece of advice is to use your resources in whatever way you can, while also remembering that resources don't look the same for everybody. And sometimes they're unconventional. But I really think that you can never overstate, or I can never overstate how much a resource that is pretty widely accessible to everyone, like my teachers, like how much of an impact they had on my college admissions process. And I would recommend everybody to think about, even if they don't have every resource that they would want to, the ones that they do have and how they can make those work.
Yeah, great. Thank you all so much. I want to thank all the panelists for talking about their experiences, coming from a small town, going to college campus, transition life, everything like that. So really appreciate you all being on and sharing those experiences.
Well, thank you, Clayton, and thank you, all of the students and parents that submitted questions. Gosh, you asked really, really good questions. So for those of you who are on the panel, since you're on screen, would you please clap and thank our guests for submitting really good questions? We do appreciate that. And now, for those of you who are guests on the other side of the screen, would you please, right where you are, clap for our panelists and thank them for the time that they've spent sharing their experience today. We do have a question from Julia about will the recording of this meeting be available?
Yeah, Corinne said in the chat, the recording may be available at a later time on the STARS Network website. I think they're currently figuring that out, but yes,
Okay.
It will be available on the STARS Network.
But again, thank you for visiting with us tonight. We appreciate your joining us for this meeting. I know that you have physics homework or something, calculus homework, so we're going to let you go and get your homework done. Thank you for coming to visit us tonight. Have a good night.